Welcome back to Same Bright Fashion Academy YouTube channel for another interesting tutorial. In this tutorial, I'll be teaching you how to sew this beautiful, stylish, transparent cupped corset. As you can see right there on the thumbnail, you can see the inside of this transparent corset is very neat and clean. I'll be teaching you the tips and tricks to coming out with a very clean, transparent corset. So the first thing we are going to do is to draft our basic bodies. I'm drafting the vertical lines from the shoulder to the waistline, and I counted 5 inches to the length of this corset. So I'm marking the lines again so I'll be able to get a straight line. So I am going to rule my lines across, starting from the shoulder, the chest line, bust point, under bust point, waistline, and then the full length of this is below my waist 5 inches. So you can also make it 6 inches. So these are my lines, and we'll start up the drafting right away. So I'm going to place my neckline. I'm using 3.5 inches for my neckline and 3.5 inches for the depth. So 3.5 by 3.5 for width and the depth of this corset. And my shoulder divided by 2, I marked it on the chest line and on the shoulder line. I came down by 1 inch for my shoulder slant and then connected a straight line. And I divided by 2 my armhole and came in by 0.5 and connected. My bust circumference divided by 4, I marked it and I connected my armhole. So the next thing we are going to do right now, I'm going to bring in my bra cup. So I'm using a bra cup 42 and 36. We are going to part this bra cup, okay? So my bust circumference is 40, so you have to step up by 2 more inches. So I use 42 and I'm going to make a dart to it. Now we are going to pad this bra cup 42. We are going to pad it with bra cup 36. That is a smaller size bra cup. So I'm going to cut off that dart, okay, to avoid that part being so bulky. So after cutting it out, you can see what I have for my corset, my bra cup. So I will put in the 36, bra cup 36, and I'll secure with my pin. I'm going over to the machine right now to hold the 2 bra cups together. I'm going to sew it at the under bust line. So after sewing, this is what I have for the 2 cups. So make sure you prepare your cups this way if you want to have a very beautiful cup. So now we will start drafting right away. So I'm going to come up on the bust point line. I'll come up by 1/2 inch and go in by 1/2 inch. That is the bust bridge. Now I'm going to place my bra cup on that bust bridge and make sure it aligns to the under bust and to the chest line. Then I'm going to draw out this bra cup, as you can see. So I'm drawing the part of the yoke line. So this is what you have after you are done drafting. So this is the yoke, and we are going to take our bust circumference on the chest line, divide by 4, I marked, and on the waistline I have 38 inches as my waist, but I'm snatching it with 2 inches. So I'm working with 36 inches right now. So divide by 4, I marked, and the hip line divide by 4, I marked. So this corset is actually dartless. There is no dart to it. So this is how to go about it. So I've connected my lines and I'll come up by 1.5 on the side just to slant the down piece to avoid pointy parts. So here my corset is ready for the front. The next I'm going to do is to cut it out. So we are going to cut it out, and I'm going to use it to cut the back piece of this corset as well. So I've cut out the neckline and the front piece is ready. So now I'm going to place my pepper below this pattern and align it to the center front and center back. There's no zipper allowance here at all. Unless you want to make use of zipper, you can add 1 inch zipper allowance. So but we are using our eyelets for this. So I secured it with my pin and I went ahead to cut it out accordingly. So this is the easiest way to cut out the back piece. So I came down by 1 inch for my neckline and I connected my neckline accordingly. So now I'm going to cut out the shoulder slant and the neckline for the back. So now the back piece is ready as well. So the next thing we are going to do is to highlight the chest line on the back. So I highlighted the chest line at the back, and this is the back yoke, and that is the chest line. So I'm going to come in by 2.5 inches for my eyelet. From the center back, I draw a straight line. So now these are the eyelet positions right away. So I'm going to cut out the 2.5 inches. When I open it, I'll be having 5 inches. So now the yoke we are making use of is the straight yoke, but if you want to go by the curvy yoke, this is how to go about it. So I'm going to use my pattern ruler now to create it, but I first made a straight line up to the mid yoke line, and I came down by 2.5 inches. That is if you want 3 buttons for this yoke. So this is the usual yoke, so you can go by this, but for this tutorial I'm going with a straight yoke. So now this is my pattern, and my pattern is ready. I'm going to have my button loops all over there. So make sure you make an arrow at that point. When we are joining this corset, we are going to join it from that point. So now I'm going to create the eyelet casing. The eyelet casing is 2 inches, and I'm going to cut it out accordingly. We are going to replace it with our doll face satin fabric, while we are going to use our corset mesh for the other part. So you can see I labeled it accordingly. So now I'm going to set the back piece aside, and then we are going to cut out the front piece. So but before you cut, please add your seam allowances. I added half an inch into the cup, so when cutting my mesh it will be very easy for me. So after adding the seam allowance, we can now go ahead and cut the yoke and cut the bust bridge. Then we are going to cut on the red line, which is the seam allowance. So here is what the front piece looks like. So you can see it's looking beautiful already. So now we are done cutting. We want to cut the bra cup cover. So you are going to fold your paper like cutting a circle 360 degrees. So I'm going to mark 5 inches all around. So you just cut 5 inches all around. That is the radius of this circle. So I'll go over to cut this circle. I know you are familiar with this part anyway, but I have to show everything. So I opened it up and I marked 1.5 inch inwards, 1.5 inch inwards, and I connected it to the center like this. So that is what we are going to use to cut out the fabric for the covering of the cup. So our patterns are quite very much ready. So I'm cutting 4 pieces for each, which is 8 pieces in total. So this is my corset mesh. You can also use a tool, a net, a mesh, if you cannot afford the corset mesh. But if you are using a tool, you have to place it 3 times or 2 times if you are using a quality tool. But for this corset mesh, I'm using only 1 piece. I'm going to cut my pattern only 1 piece because the corset mesh is actually very, very thick. So I'm going to place my pattern right now. So for the front piece, I'll place it on fold. So that means I'm going to fold my corset mesh right away. I'll place it on fold, and then I'm going to place my pattern on the folded edge. So here I am going to secure my pattern with a pin right now before I cut. So I'm going to add 1/2 inch seam allowance on the side. So this is what I got. So for the back, I still want to place the back too. So but I'm going to cut out the eyelet piece. So make sure you cut out the eyelet piece so you don't waste your corset mesh. So I label them up because they look very much alike. So I'm going to pin it right now on the corset mesh. So the next thing I'm going to do is to start to add my seam allowances. So I added 1/2 inch on the bust bridge, but I did not add anything on the corset part because I've already added my seam allowance. Then I added 1/2 inch on top of there, and on the side I added 1/2 inch as well. On the down piece, 1/2 inch. So just add 1/2 inch everywhere. And for this part too, I'm going to add half an inch everywhere. So that is for our stitching allowances. So after adding all these seam allowances, we will now proceed to the stitching of this corset. So here are my cuttings right now, and this is just what you need. I'm taking off my pattern right away. So when I spread it open, you can see what my front piece looks like. And I have 2 pieces for the back piece. So I'll go ahead to draw my boning lines. So you can create your boning lines anyhow you want. So I spaced my boning line at 1.5 inch, 1.5 inch. So you can make it 2 inches, you can make it 1.5, you know, like that. So but I use 1.5 inch spacing after I mark the one at the center. So I'm going to rule my lines accordingly. Okay, you can still slant this corset if you want. On the down piece, I came by 1 inch, and in between 1.5, just to have a little slant at that front piece. So here I'm done. So the triangular part, you have to mark on the last boning channel on the waistline. Then on the down piece, you come in by 1.5 inch and connect a triangle to it to the waistline. I came in by 1.5 inch on the side and connected it like a triangle to the waistline. That's what I'm trying to explain. So you can see it right there. So for the back piece too, I'm going to come out by 2 inches first, because there is half an inch seam allowance, then 1.5, 1.5 after I mark 2 inches from the center back. Then I'm going to rule my lines accordingly. So after I'm done ruling my lines, the next thing we'll do right now is to cut out the yoke. So for the yoke, I don't want any seam line at all. So I'm going to tape my seam line, my shoulder seam line. I'm going to tape it so we can cut it without joining it at all. So that is the easiest way to go about your yoke without joining. So you can see how I'm placing it. There's not going to be any seam allowance on that part. So now I'm going to bring in, after gumming it, I'll bring in my mesh. So make sure you use a quality mesh. Don't use a bad mesh. Use a quality mesh for this project. So I want it to have a lining. So I folded it the first time and folded it again the second time if you want it to have a lining. But if you want it to be single, you can just fold just once. So I'm going to place the center front, which is on the folded part, on the folded edge. So you can see how the back is slanting because of the shoulder slant that we added. So you just go ahead and secure it with your pins accordingly. Then you are going to add half inch seam allowance on the neckline if you want to stitch the neckline. But if you want the neckline seamless, please don't add anything. So I added 0.5 inch all around. As you can see me right here, you can see I added half an inch all around, including the button loop area. So I'm done cutting out my yoke, and you can see what my yoke looks like right now. So the next we'll do is to start sewing our boning channel. So I brought my fabric and I folded it. So I'm going to space it at 1.5 inch, 1.5 inch. Then after spacing it at 1.5 inch, I'm going to also rule the lines accordingly. So I'm going to rule all the lines so I have enough strips for this sewing. So you can see me cutting out the strips right now. The folded part, I'm trying to divide it into 2. So here I'm going to cut out all my strips, and I'm going to use these strips I'm cutting out right now for the sewing of the boning channels and everything. So here is my Regling boning I'm using. I'm using 0.5 inch Regling boning. So this 0.5 inch Regling boning, I want to show you how I'm going to use it to stitch my boning channel. So I first measure the center one. You measure it to the end, and then you take off 2 inches from it. So I took off 2 inches, as you can see. So this is how it's supposed to be, 1 inch off on top and 1 inch off below. So next I'm going to bring in my piece of fabric which I just cut out now at 1.5 inches. You can see it's 1.5 inches. So you are going to put in the boning 1 inch downwards and fold it this way. You will just put it inside and fold it. So when you fold it, you are going to place it on top of the corset mesh and you are going to stitch beside the boning. So as you are sewing, you will be feeling the boning. Don't stitch on top of the boning, just stitch beside the boning and on the line you marked. So that is how I kept sewing like that, beside the boning and on the mark I marked, until I got to the end of it. So I will just cut it off right there. Then I'm going to flip it again to the right side just to cover it completely, and I'm going to complete my boning stitching. So after I'm done running that stitches on that side, I also ran another stitch on the other side. You know we are working with Regling boning. It's a sewable boning. You can sew on it. So that is exactly what I'm doing right here. So now I'm going to cut it off. The excesses, you just turn it to the back and cut them off accordingly. So this is how I'm going to stitch all the bonings. So I'm done stitching all the bonings. So the triangular part, I want to show you how I stitched it. So you are going to also measure your boning on the triangular part. So you can see what I have, a full boning, but I'm going to reduce it by only 1 inch. I'll reduce it by only 1 inch. Then I'm going to also slant this part because we are going to have another boning running on top of it. So you just go ahead and slant it diagonally like this, so it fits accordingly to that part. You can see it there. Now we can now wrap it. So I'm going to wrap it the way I wrapped the rest of the boning, and I'm going to place it on that line, and I'm going to stitch beside the boning like I taught you. So I will implore you to just watch this video and follow video instructions. This video is very simple, and if you follow this instruction, you can make it your transparent corset. So once I got to the end, I also flipped to close it and stitched to the line. Okay, don't stitch beyond this line because we are going to place our next boning on top of it. So after cutting it off, this is what I got. So the next thing we are going to do now is to place the next boning. So I placed the next boning just like the normal bonings, and I left 1 inch below and on top. So I'm going to wrap it up with my 1.5 inch strip, and I have to stitch by the side of the boning as well. So what I'm doing is just practically repeating what I did for the rest of the bonings. So you are going to stitch from top to bottom, and after stitching from top to bottom, the next thing you are going to do right away is to flip it to the right side to complete the boning. So here I'm going to flip it to the right side now, and I'm going to cover the boning accordingly. So you can see how it actually covered the triangular part of this boning. So I'm going to run another stitch to complete the boning. Then after that, I'm going to cut out the excesses. So the front piece of this corset is ready. So you can see what we got is looking very beautiful. I'm really very proud of this corset anyway. So the next thing we are going to do now is to jump into the back piece. So the front piece is ready. We are going to work on the back piece. So for the back piece, I'm going to prepare the eyelet casing. So you can see that piece is going to be for the eyelet casing. So I've already hasted my fabric, and the width of my fabric is 5 inches. I folded 5 inches in. So I just got a long length of this. Okay, I did not measure it. I just got a long length. So we are going over to the machine right now, and this is how we are going to stitch this. So I'm going to show you how to stitch this accordingly. So here you are going to choose the part that is your wrong side and your right side. So I choose this part as my wrong side. So this wrong side I've chosen right now. I'm going to place the wrong side to the right side of the fabric. wrong side to the right side of the fabric. Then I'm going to stitch at 1/2 inch. I'll stitch from at 1/2 inch to the end. So once I got to the end of the corset mesh, then I'm going to cut it out accordingly. So I just gave like 1 inch before I cut. So the next thing we are going to do now is to flip it to the right side. The part that I folded at 1/2 inch, you will use it to cover it this way and top stitch right on the stitches. So here you can see me top stitching right on the stitches, and I'm going to do that to the end of the casing. So after I'm done doing that, the next thing we are going to do is to iron it out. You go to your ironing table and give it a good press, because we are going to run our boning channels on this eyelet. So this is my eyelet, and I left 1 inch as usual. So my eyelet is 1/2 inch. You can see it's 1/2 inch. So it means you are going to run your channel at 1/2 inch, okay, or just a little below, above 1/2 inch, just a little. Now I'm going to stitch following my marking. So our eyelet is going to be in between the boning channels. So I made the first line and I made the second line. So you can see what I got after I'm done making the line. So I'm going to insert my boning right into it. You can use a nylon boning for this. You can use a Regling boning for it, okay? So any of them can also work. So here I've inserted my boning accordingly. Now you can see that how firm that part is to carry our eyelet. So I'm going to also wrap up my 1.5 inch fabric, and I'm going to stitch on the back casings right now. So the back boning lines, I'm going to use the same method I taught you for the front to stitch the rest of them. So I'm going to wrap it up. After stitching the first one, I'm going to stitch to the end, and then I'm going to turn it the other way and continue my stitches accordingly. So now we want to join the front and the back. So this is how you join it. You join it to the front piece, okay? So you join it upwards to face the front part. Then you are going to stitch at 1/2 inch. So here you can see me running my stitches from top to bottom. So after stitching, the next thing you are going to do is to trim off the excesses. Make sure you trim this excess, or else it will be difficult for you to stitch the boning channel. So now after that, I'm going to spread it open, and I'll bring in my 1.5 inch fabric. So first measure your Regling boning as we have been doing. Just come down by 1 inch and wrap it up and place it beside the stitches. This part has to be beside the stitches, and you'll be spreading your fabric, the front and back, be spreading them, because it has the tendency to come closer if you don't spread it. So to avoid stitching on top of each other, keep spreading your fabric. You can see, and I'm sewing just beside the stitches. So I'm going to sew from that point till I get to the end, and I'm going to cut it off accordingly. So the next is to wrap it close and then stitch the second line. So after stitching to the end, I'm going to also run another stitch on the other side of the boning, as you can see. So now this is what I got, and everything is looking so beautiful. So now we want to work on the yoke. So we are going to fix the back yoke, and I'm going to show you a technique to fixing this back yoke to look neat. For the front piece of the yoke, we are going to drape it, but the back we are going to stitch it. So right now I'm going to place I'm opening my yoke anyway. So I will advise you, since it is 2 pieces, you can just go and run a basting stitch on below it, just to hold the 2 stitches together. Then if you are also going to stitch your neckline, this is the time to stitch your neckline and trim it off. But for this tutorial, I decided not to stitch it at all. So now I'm going to turn my corset, and I want to place the back yoke the way it should be. Remember, I made a notch at that part. So that notch is the part we are going to stitch from that eyelet position. So we'll go over to the machine now. This is what I was explaining. The notched part, you can see it has to be fixed at that point. That is how we drafted it. Then you are going to put it together. You can see how I'm putting it together. So once you put it together that way, the next we are going to do is to bring the strip that we are going to cover it. So I'm going to bring the 1.5-inch strip and I'm going to fold it this way. But since we are working at the center back, just fold it in by 5 inches before you fold it again. Of course, you saw what I did. So follow these instructions, you will get it. So I'm going to stitch 1/2 inch, as you can see right now. I will stitch 1/2 inch until I get to the end of the back piece. I'll take it all the way till the end. So now I'm supposed to trim off. Please don't forget to trim off the stitches. So the covering of this part will be very easy. But spread out your yoke. Please make sure you spread out your yoke so you don't stitch on the yoke. So I'm going to fold the strip and then use it to cover the stitches. So I later trimmed the seam allowances off because it will not be easy for you to stitch if you don't trim it out. So after stitching, this is what I got. You can see my dress is ready and it is neat at the back and at the front. So now this is where our corset is going to be. So we are going to work on the bust bridge. So the 1.5-inch too, we are going to place it on the wrong side and then stitch 1/2 inch as well. So after stitching the 1/2 inch, I'm going to cut off or trim off the seam allowances because it's just the same process we've been using for the upper piece we will use for it too. So don't forget to reduce the seam allowance, then you flip it close and top stitch on top of it. So after I'm done top stitching, next is to flip it to the back and now trim out the shape of the cup. So this is how it's going to look. Then I'm going to finish up the back piece too. So this is the back part of the yoke. So I will also encourage you to stitch on the yoke at 1/2 inch first so it does not flip up and down. So you can see how I picked it. So this is another method you can use. I just want to show you another method. So once you put it together, first stitch on top of it at 1/2 inch. I think it will be very easy for beginners to work on it like this. So after stitching the 1/2 inch, then the next you will do is to bring in the strip. You turn it to the other side, bring in the strip, then wrap it together. So I'm going to stitch to the center back. So getting to the center back, don't forget to fold in 1/2 inch to make that part neat. So I folded in 1/2 inch before I stitched. So after stitching, I reduce the seam allowances. So after reducing the seam allowance, the next thing I'm going to do now is to spread my yoke. Don't forget to spread it before you top stitch on the strip. So I'm top stitching on the strip, as you can see, and that is it. So you can see that part is looking beautiful. So we are done, and now we want to talk about the down piece. So the down piece, I still use the 1.5 inch of my strip, and this is how I folded it, 1/2 inch inwards, and then I stitched at 1/2 inch. So I'm going to stitch at 1/2 inch like that until I got to the end of this corset. So I cut out 1/2 inch. I also use it to wrap it, so you can see the way I'm wrapping it. So now I'm going to bring it out and then fold in 1/2 inch inwards. So I top stitched on it until I got to the end of it. So at this point, this corset is very much ready. So once I'm done stitching to the end, this is my yoke for the front. So it's going to be draped after fixing the corset cup. So we'll move over to the corset cup right now. So this is the corset cup and I've cut out the pieces. I cut out for 4 inches. So please don't add any seam allowance on this, okay? The 5 inches is very much enough. So what I'm going to do now is to take off the pattern and I'll start joining all the pieces together at 1/2 inch. So after joining, this is what I had, and I'm going to trim off the excess. Don't forget to trim this excess off before you use it to wrap up your bra cup. So I'm going to trim all of them, which I've done right now, and I'm going to place it this way. So you can see how I placed it, secure with my pin, and I'm going to use it to dress this cup. So I'm going to make sure that there is no rumpling anywhere. So I'm going to dress this cup very, very well and allow it to lap very, very well too. So this is what it looks like after I'm done. So the next I'm going to do after pinning it all around is to go over to the machine, and I'm going to stitch on the edges. So here I'm done stitching and I'm taking off my pins. So I will turn it the other way and make sure my seam allowance is 1/2 inch all around. So if you are on a bigger cup, I will advise you cut your circle at 5.5 or 6 inches, okay, if you are using a bigger cup. So but for bust 40, 5 inches is okay, 40 and below. So this is the cover of the cup. I'll make sure I match the seam lines. Make sure you match the seam lines for professionalism. So here I'm pinning, as you can see, the upper piece of the cup. So I'll just go and stitch on it at 1/2 inch. So after stitching, I'm going to reduce it at 1/2 inch too. Then next is to flip all the seams to the lining and top stitch so it relaxes very well on the front. So this is what the cup looks like. So I'm going to match it up very well so we can trim off the excess to match up with the front half seam allowance at 1/2 inch. So you can secure with your pins, as you can see me do right here. So you'll be able to get this very well, and make sure the lining went into the cup inwards very, very well. This is very important. So whatever excess you have right now, then you are going to cut it off to match what we have on the upper piece of the cup. So after trimming it, the next thing we want to do now, I've done it for the two, so you can see the lining is open. So we'll go over to the machine now. So this is how I'm going to stitch on the machine. I'm going to stitch in the lining first. So this is how the cup is supposed to be. So I'll just flip it this way and stitch the lining part of this cup round the cup. That is what I'm going to do right now. Then we'll now top stitch on the upper piece. So here on my machine, this is how the cup is supposed to be. So I flip it the other way and I'm going to match the lining piece, and I'm going to stitch at 1/2 inch. So make sure you line it very well. If you want a neat corset, just make sure it's being aligned appropriately. So I'm going to align the corset mesh with the cup. I'll just take my time and align it. So I slowed down a little bit on this part because I really want you to understand how I stitch in this cup. So you can see how I'm stitching it. So I'm making sure I'm matching the down and matching the up. Okay, that is the only way your cup can align accordingly. Okay, without having any shortage or any discrepancy. So here I'm stitching, and here you can see what I got. I've gotten to the beginning of the cup, so I top stitch. So now we are done, and this is what I got, and this is what the back looks. Very neat. You can see very, very neat. So the next thing we are going to do now is to fold in the seam allowance. Okay, we will fold in the seam allowance, and then you are going to top stitch right on top of the lines. As you are stitching, you will be dropping it on the line of the back of the lining. You will be seeing the lines, so make sure it does not exceed the line, so your cup takes exactly the right shape. So I took my time on this part to stitch on it, as you can see. So I'll keep stitching and folding in, and this method I use there is also the method I am going to use for the left cup. So I will keep folding in like this until I got to the end of it. So I'm almost getting to the end of it, and this is it. I will finish it up accordingly. So you can see how beautiful my corset is looking. This is actually looking wonderful. So now we want to drape in the yoke. So to drape in the yoke, you can wear this dress on the body of your client if she's around. But if she's not around, just go ahead and use the 1/2 inch we stitched on the yoke to drape it. So I'll just pin the half inch. You will see the half inches I made, lines I made. Just secure the bust bridge first, then place it on top of the cup at 1/2 inch and secure to the end. I'm going to also do the same the other side. So once I'm securing, I'm done securing now. The next thing I'll do is to go over to the machine and follow the stitches I made on the yoke and stitch directly on top of the corset cup. Okay, because we are going to embellish this part, that's why we are working on it this way. So of course many luxury dresses nowadays are being well embellished. So this is what I have, and that is how we'll come to the end of this tutorial. So I believe this tutorial is very helpful to you. So if it's very helpful to you, please drop a comment on the comment section. So thank you very much for coming to this tutorial once again. If you are new to this channel, please kindly subscribe, turn on your notification bell to receive videos like this every day. Like this video, share to family and friends, and you can also join our corset class on Telegram to learn how this dress is finished with our lace. Thanks for watching. Bye.